Welcome to another edition of the Willie Bragg Show. I'm your host, Willie Bragg. I'm back again. I was supposed to be here at 7:30, but I made a decision and I decided to share this with y'all. I'm trying to get a schedule Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I've been pretty consistent with having this show on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Trying to get it on at 7:15 or 7:30. It's been kind of a thorny for me. So what I'm going to try to start doing is I'm going to have it on at 8 o'clock. That is my decision. So the official time for the Willie Bragg Show will be 8 o'clock Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and that way I don't have to go and say, well, gee, guys, I'm going to be a little bit late today. So my apologies about that. And I'm saying this so I don't have to keep apologizing for myself. So I try to keep things professional here for y'all. So let's see here. Desert Mantis says, Willie, you're breaking my heart. And I apologize once again. Miguel, how are you doing today? I am doing good. Otherwise, from being late. Okay, we have any more people here? We had Earl. How are you doing? Hey guys, and anybody else on board yet? Well, I mean, we have more than just stated up here, but I think everybody's pretty shy. You don't have to be shy. Go and say hello. So, anyway, let me get to the subject at hand. Whistleblowers. And when you think historically whistleblowers, we think of people like Daniel Ellsberg, for example. Daniel Ellsberg, the Pentagon Papers. And the funny thing about Daniel Ellsberg was I was supposed to interview Daniel Ellsberg because I have a friend that lives in Garner, North Carolina. Patrick and his wife Mary, who are both with the Catholic Worker Movement, a pacifist group. And Patrick was with the War Resisters League, also a pacifist organization. So, they had ties to Daniel Ellsberg, and historically with people like Sister Dorsey Day and other pacifists and nonviolent activists, and people that kind of set precedence for a lot of the anti-imperialist movements that exist today in the U.S. I think they can kind of look at people like Daniel Ellsberg, people like David McReynolds, people like Sister Dorsey Day, people like that as kind of an inspiration there. So, and as far as whistleblowers today, we think of not just Julian Assange, but we also think of Ed Snowden. We also think of Chelsea Manning, and Chelsea Manning is free, and Julian Assange is free. Ed Snowden is free in another country, and so he had to flee to Russia, and everybody said, well, they endanger U.S. security. They told the truth about the U.S. Truths that we kind of known already. Nevertheless, they were uncomfortable truths about how the U.S. conducts its foreign policy. And so, I'm glad we have. Basically whistleblowers out there that they're causing a lot of havoc and all of that. And so and when I think about it, I was like, we need more of this sort of thing, and we need these people, and and we need to give them our support, because if not, heavens knows what more damage could be done to our civil liberties, and what could be done against other people around the world with the way our national security state likes to do things. And so once again, I am grateful to our whistleblowers. You don't have to always ideologically agree with them, because there's one person that I have taken issue with in the last couple of years, that I am kind of obliged to defend this evening in context to what we're talking about. And it would have been nice when Julian Assange was released to hear her actually talk about Julian Assange, because 4 years ago she wouldn't shut the fuck up about Julian Assange, and not a peep came out of her attractive little pie hole about Julian Assange when he became free. And I'm talking about Tulsi Gabbard. I'm going to be talking about Tulsi Gabbard tonight, and I'm going to be talking about Scott Ritter. And they both are not without controversy, of course. I've had Scott Ritter on the Willie Bragg Show before. I met Scott Ritter at Rage Against War Machine, and I saw him speak at the Assange, one of the Assange rallies I went to almost 2 years ago in D.C. And I'm going to I want to see if he's interested in coming back on this show, because I'm kind of interested in having a chat with him about the raid that took place at his home last week, which we're going to be talking about right now during this video. So, but as I said, I get the notion that the U.S. wants to create another Julian Assange now that Julian Assange is freed. And that is my impression. So, what do we do, in that regard? That's the thing right there. So we got a situation with former representatives Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, Democratic Congresswoman from Hawaii, that ran for president in 2020, and she is actually in many ways kind of an interesting figure, because the thing about Tulsi is that it's her history on where she got where she was at, and politically speaking. And what I mean by that is that she was she got elected in 2012, and I remember her getting elected in 2012 as a congresswoman in the 2nd Congressional District. And she was kind of eyed on by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton as an heir apparent to what was going to be a 2-term Clinton presidency. Everybody just assumed Barack Obama got reelected and that Hillary Clinton was just going to carry on the mantle in 2016. And in 2020, she will be reelected easily. And then Tulsi Gabbard will carry on the mantle and become the presidential nominee for the Democrats in 2024. And she was not necessarily I don't think she was a corporate Democrat the way Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were. She was not on the left the way that people perceive, and I'm used to the word perceive with quotation marks, perceive the squad of today. She was a down the line Democrat. She was politically savvy enough to shake off some of her more conservative baggage from the past. But at the same time, she kind of stayed on what was a down the line, in the middle, centrist course for the 20-teens. And that was the line she was going to be on. And I think she was going to do that. But here's the thing. A friend of mine and myself were talking about Tulsi Gabbard, and we both agree she is one hell of a grifter. She goes wherever the wind blows. And you can go back, as I was saying, go back to 2012. Look where she was at. She was basically another Hillary Clinton, another Barack Obama, another Hurricane Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She was another Hakeem Jeffries. She was another Nancy Pelosi. She was just another Democrat. That's what she was. She was just another Democrat. And she saw in Bernie Sanders in 2016 what was looking like a new movement in formation. She saw the future, quotation marks, in Bernie Sanders. And when she saw that future, she decided this might be the gravy train to be on. So she basically told the truth about the Democratic National Committee, about the mainstream media, what they were doing to Bernie Sanders. And looking back in hindsight, I was thinking she was doing this out of principle. No, she wasn't. She was doing this out of political opportunism. So she became the proto AOC, the AOC before there was the AOC, the pretty face that was considered a radical revolutionary. So she got on board. No, she's not a socialist. She wasn't even a socialist then, but she got on board as this progressive that was defending Bernie Sanders, and she was a campaign surrogate for Bernie Sanders. So if she wants to sit there and dunk on the left, the left is actually placed her where she's at today in her stature. So she knew it. She really needs to be grateful to Bernie Sanders and that movement rather than to dunk it. Of course, I don't mind her dunking on the Democratic Party apparatus. And she's correct when she calls them the party of warmongers. But listen, you claim to be independent, Tulsi, but you really teamed up with the party of Nikki Haley, the party of John Bolton. And you're sounding more and more like John Bolton and Nikki Haley, more than you did 4 or 5 years ago when you sounded kind of like Abby Martin, like an Abby Martin light. That was the lane you were going on. You were going on that lane. You were going down that anti-imperialist route, and you were doing it as you were doing it basically as with the kind of I'm a patriotic soldier kind of outlook. And so that's what happened with her. She was doing this out of opportunism, and in doing so, she ended up getting attacked by not just the neocons who have distrusted her from her times going into Syria, which she was correct to do, to go into Syria, to go and try to work on peace issues relating to peace. So there was that. And so they vilify her. But yeah, you know what? The corporate Democrats also decided to go and vilify her too, with this, Russiagate and McCarthyism sort of thing, neo-McCarthyism, as I like to call it. And so, I mean, and while she's kind of loathed by a lot of Democrats and progressives today, they see her as a traitor and somebody who's independent and on the left that used to defend her. Not that because she parted ways with the Democratic Party, but I am resentful that she basically even fucked the left over, who were her biggest defenders, and she went over and started playing footsies with people on the right, and the people on the right that would have dismissed her 10, 12 years ago. And if she's not careful, because there are still people like the Liz Cheneys of the world and the Mitt Romneys of the world that don't trust her. Mark Levin's of the world that don't trust her. The National Review don't trust her. And if Trump gets reelected, and some of these people, influence Trump into a more Bush-Cheney direction, you could see another episode of the Dreyfus Affair taking place. Or it could happen if Kamala Harris is elected in 2024. Either way. Now, what is the Dreyfus Affair? well, the Dreyfus affair in the 19th century was basically trumped our charges against a French officer in the Third French Republic, and Alfred Dreyfus. And in his case, and in the case of late 19th century France, it was anti-Semitism that motivated the hatred of Alfred Dreyfus. But in the case of Tulsi Gabbard, it's the fact that, she's Hindu tied to Modi, perhaps that tie in there, and her perceived anti-Muslim bigotry, perceived, as I said, I'm saying this because I don't want to go and slander somebody. So, and fair point, Miguel, she is a Zionist, which she was downplaying that 4 years ago. In fact, she was really downplaying that 4 years ago, which was causing neocons to hate her. And now she's gotten kind of bold with it. So you can't trust Tulsi Gabbard. And if she is she really a Zionist, or is it basically this? She figures this is the camp to go into for the time being. The amazing is, you said one time that, one hand, she sounds good on paper, and I'm paraphrasing him, but on the other hand, he don't quite trust her. This was back in 2019, 2020. And he turned out to be correct in saying he didn't trust her. So if you're not careful, Tulsi, remember the Dreyfus affair. You do not want to end up in the American version of Devil's Island. That's just my friendly advice to you in that regard. Because I think either way, you're going to have the national security state after you. They're kind of after you right now, with you being on the their polite no-fly list, what's called like the quiet list and everything. Which brings me to this video here by what is her name? Her name is the Liberty Doll. She's a libertarian ideologue that she's talks about Tulsi Gabbard being on a terrorist watch list. So I'm going to play her video, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward, because we're the budget on the time thing. I think it's kind of important to do that. And let me do this here, and this should this will kind of help explain things here right now. So we'll start with Tulsi Gabbard, and then we'll follow with Scott Ritter. So after my comments about the Tulsi Gabbard situation, her being on this terrorist spy list thing. So give me a second here. Here we go. Take it away, Liberty Doll. Woo, hold on. There we go. There we go.
Whistleblowers have come forward and report that a former member of Congress and presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard is on TSA's surveillance list of suspected terrorists. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This week, we heard from several federal air marshal whistleblowers with information that former rep and presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard is currently enrolled in the Quiet Skies program, a TSA surveillance program with its own terrorist watch list. It is a program that allegedly is designed to catch traveling Americans from domestic terrorists, but has also been weaponized against January 6th defendants and their families, including an infant, because his father attended the infamous rally. Clearly, he is a danger. Also on the list is an air marshal's wife and a 20-year veteran, just for being in D.C., not even the protest, just the city, on January 6th. And like most government lists, it's very difficult to get off of. The news first broke as an exclusive from Undercover DC, complete with screenshots from the database as proof. The info first went to Sonia Labasco, the executive director of the Air Marshal National Council, a national advocacy group, a group whose director and president have been vocal about the government classifying innocent Americans as terrorists and adding them to these lists, all willy-nilly, as the government does. They've written countless letters to the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, the House Homeland Committee, the Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government, and the House Oversight Committee, voicing their concerns and even trying to get the program shut down, obviously with no luck. According to Bosco, every flight Gabbard boards also carries 2 explosive detection canine teams, 1 transportation security specialist for explosives, 1 plainclothes TSA supervisor, and 3 federal air marshals, all without her knowledge, and a lot of tax dollars. She says that
I'm going to interrupt her for a second. Now, I have a lot of issues with Tulsi these days. I make that no secret. But do I think that Tulsi is going to cause any havoc on a flight? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't even think Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I despise overtly, as cartoonishly fascistic as she is, would go and try to hijack a plane. She would be a Karen on a flight, but being a Karen and being a terrorist are 2 different things. But as for Tulsi Gabbard, no, I don't think she's going to go and whip out an AK-47 or an AR-15 and hijack a plane. I mean, this is crazy.
that she has tried to contact Gabbard about this, but so far hasn't had any luck. I'm sure by now that it is starting to get into the news cycle, she has figured it out. Now, before I get into the rest of the details and the proof, at least from the outside that this is politically motivated, I want to tell you about today's sponsor. They might not be able to get you off a terrorist watch list because no one can, but they are the folks that you want in your corner if you ever find yourself in a self-defense incident. The Attorneys on Retainer program from the Attorneys for Freedom wants to make sure that you are covered for legal defense if a self-defense incident happens. They are actual lawyers whose job is to give you legal counsel rather than an insurance company with all kinds of exclusions and fine print that, frankly, often is more interested in covering their butts. Attorneys on Retainer has you covered for misdemeanors, felonies, appeals, and even bail bonds. It doesn't even matter if you were in a gun-free zone. And unlike insurance companies, their only requirements are that the incident happened after purchasing coverage and that you reasonably acted in good faith. So switch over from your existing self-defense coverage, head on over to my link down in the description and use code LibertyDoll to get $50 off your sign-up. Now, back to the rest of the video. Labasco believes the feds are specifically targeting conservatives, though Gabbard doesn't exactly fit that mold. She's pissed a few people off. She endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2016. She endorsed Joe Biden in 2020. She is liked by many independents and libertarians, and even some conservatives, and has fabulous hair, by the way, though historically her positions on universal health care and gun control left a lot to be desired. She has changed her mind on some of those gun control issues and made headlines when she left the Democratic Party in recent years, instead calling herself an independent. She said that the Democrats...
Yeah, she did. But, when you become an independent, leaving the Democratic Party and only bash Democrats and defend Republicans, you're a Republican. But I'm a principled person. And when you're being harassed, you're being harassed. And my theory is that they're weaponizing our government basically to punish her for endorsing Donald Trump. Now, I do not support Donald Trump, but that is her right to support Donald Trump, as much as I don't like it. Of course, I wouldn't like if she endorsed Biden either, or in this case, Kamala Harris, which she would never endorse Kamala Harris. She destroyed Kamala Harris's campaign in 2020 from the left. So all the conservatives that love Tulsi Gabbard today don't even realize that they have more in common with 2020 Kamala Harris than they do 2020 Tulsi Gabbard. I just thought I state that out just for good measure. But having that said, I think that that's partly what it's all about. And if liberals are going to be happy that Tulsi Gabbard is getting punished, let me caution them that even though that there's a honeymoon right now and everybody's high off of Kamala Harris and she's yes queening everyone, there's no guarantee she's going to be the president. And Donald Trump is being a little bitch right now. There's no guarantee that his campaign is going to be a total fuck up. And there's still a chance that he could win this election. It's still his election to lose right now. And if he wins this election with a supermajority for congressional Republicans, and if Project 2025 is a thing like all the Democrats and shit lives are acting like with the sky's falling, and I do have concerns about Project 2025 myself, who's not to say that that same government that's been weaponized against Tulsi Gabbard right now, who's not to say that it will be weaponized against some beloved figure right now on the Democratic side? Who's not to say that that was going to happen? So people on both sides need to be careful when they're in power, when they weaponize the government against political opponents. And I know I sound like a libertarian saying this. I have libertarian impulses, but I'm not a libertarian, even though I am playing a libertarian video. But I just wanted to go and say that because Liberty Doll is libertarian. And I think that I do think she gave it, she's giving a very fair view of the situation. So I'll let her continue.
Democrats had become a party of anti-white wokeness that was pitching the country towards a nuclear war. She has been critical of the U.S.'s endless wars, interventionism, and has been leaning more conservative in her stances since leaving the party. She even endorsed some Republicans during the 2022 midterm elections, including J.D. Vance and Carrie Lake, has appeared on Fox News and even spoke at CPAC in 2022 and 2024. She has been critical of the government's treatment of January 6th attendees and went so far as to call Adam Schiff himself a domestic terrorist. Can't say that I disagree with her. There were even rumors of her being on Trump's list for VP running mates, though obviously she did not make that final cut. Either way, she's been making some waves. So basically, the Biden administration / deep state, though at this point they are one and the same, probably see her as a dangerous turncoat. But I wouldn't think those positions are necessarily enough to stick her on a watch list. But then again, Hillary Clinton called her a Russian asset back in 2020, and we all know what happens when you get on the wrong side of Hillary Clinton.
That is true. And my big criticism of Tulsi Gabbard in 2019, 2020, when that happened, because in fairness, Hillary Clinton didn't say her name directly, but we all knew what she said, that they're looking at a candidate right now, and they're grooming her. They're looking at her closely. And there were a couple of women in that race, but it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they were talking about Tulsi Gabbard, that she was talking about Tulsi Gabbard possibly running as a Green Party candidate in 2020. I think that that's what Hillary Clinton was alluding to. And so, and of course, that didn't happen. What happened was that Tulsi Gabbard ended up endorsing Joe Biden when she should have endorsed Bernie Sanders. But there was some bad beef going on between the Bernie campaign and her campaign. So and we've been through that before, and I've had my theories on that. That was one of my early signs of having a bad opinion of her right there. And I was at that time wanting her to be a VP for Bernie Sanders, because I used to think she was the real deal. So, but my big contention with Tulsi Gabbard in regard to Hillary Clinton in 2019, 2020, she was correct to file a $50 million lawsuit against Hillary Clinton. She was wrong to drop the $50 million lawsuit. She should have kept it going, for nothing more than to cost Hillary Clinton a headache.
And I mean, these days, the government targeting their political adversaries is just common practice. According to Undercover DC, an individual is enrolled in the program without their knowledge for national security reasons. Teams of federal air marshals are assigned to individuals, following and tracking them from when they enter the airport and then on all of their flights and transits until they reach their destination. Enrolled individuals usually have a quad S on the bottom right-hand corner of their boarding passes, but not always. They are often flagged for extra searches, frequently so lengthy that they miss their flights. According to Labasco, Gabbard's enrollment in Quiet Skies is likely politically motivated. Air marshals were first assigned to Gabbard on July 23rd, a day after she criticized Kamala Harris, Biden, and the national security state in an interview with Laura Ingraham. FAM's, federal air marshals, were mobilized on July 24th and assigned to their first flight with her on July 25th. That alone to me is enough to convince me that it's politically motivated, as that is too big of a coincidence. At the end of the day, it's just more proof that the government has been weaponized against its citizens, and even a former politician isn't safe from it just because she stopped towing the party line. All right, folks, that is it for this video. You guys know the drill for all of the algorithm things. Please ring that notification bell and check your subscriptions. Drop a comment down below. And as always, thanks for tuning in and happy shooting.
Okay, so that's my take. Again, you don't have to be a supporter of Tulsi Gabbard to realize she's getting shafted. So and that's basically my point. And I try to be fair. Next point of contention we're going to be talking about is the controversial UN weapons inspector, Scott Ritter. Again, I met Scott Ritter at the Rage Against the War Machine event last year. Had a good vibe about him when I met him. Likable person, all of that. And as I said, I've often have said about Scott Ritter. Had people listened to Scott Ritter 20 years ago, before the Iraq War, 22 years ago, before the Iraq War started, we would have a million Iraqis still alive today. We'd have thousands of American troops either all definitely alive and not psychologically fucked in the head or not having limbs gone. And once again, alive. We would not be $35 trillion in debt, because you're talking about one of the biggest, you talk about stuffing money down the toilet. It happened as a result of the war on terror that Bush Cheney havoc as a result of 9/11, the way that they conducted it. And that was basically to invade another country and ask questions later. And scare the hell out of the American people, surveillance state the American people. So, and that's another thing I want them to say, it looks very bad for what the Biden administration is doing, and fuck them for what they're doing, But let's not act like this is something that they drudged up, because each administration has done this since Bush Cheney. Bush Cheney started this crap. Not that America was a civil liberties utopia prior to 9/11, but as a result of 9/11, starting with the U.S. Patriot Act and Department of Homeland Security and all this shit, we are being surveillance. And that's what it comes down to. And a lot of the people who are complaining today about it didn't have jack shit to say about it when Bush Cheney were in the White House. In fact, they were complaining about these liberal pussies complaining about right to privacy. But when a Democrat is president, then the Republicans start complaining about right to privacy. I, on the other hand, complain about right to privacy no matter who's in the White House. Look, Cornel West could become president, or Jill Stein could become president. And if they started this shenanigans, I would call them out on this bullshit. So I am not being a partisan hack, even on my side when it comes to this thing. I'm a fair person. Now, with regard to Scott Ritter, they have smeared this man. Destroy his image in many, many ways that I don't really care to talk about, because I know a frame up when I see one, and he's been set up in many ways. Won't go into detail. You know what it is. I don't like to talk about it, but I do not believe that Scott Ritter is what some people want to claim he is. So, here's the thing about Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter is a critic of how the U.S. conducts its foreign policy, and he's a critic of what the U.S. government's doing against the American people, because we're losing our freedoms. And Dwight Eisenhower warned us as he was leaving the office in 1961 about the power of the military-industrial complex, and he turned out to be right. And I think it was Glenn Greenwald that came up with the phrase "the deep state." But we've always had the deep state, and the deep state are right now targeting, as I mentioned, Tulsi Gabbard, but they have been targeting Scott Ritter and continue to do so as we're going to find out here this Kim Iverson video. So give me a second here, and we will be discussing that. So let me go ahead and do just that. Okay. Why is it doing that? Okay. Give me a second here. We'll get started. In a second.
Former UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter being raided by the FBI. Former UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter being raided by the FBI today. So this news came out that Scott Ritter was raided. We do have some video of the raid that happened at his house today. He lives just outside of Albany, New York. Let's go ahead and look at the raid. Here they are, the FBI. They went to his house. Nobody really knew what was going on. They saw that the FBI was raiding his house, and Scott Ritter was nowhere to be found in these images or in this video of the raid, but FBI agents were swarming. A little bit later on, and there were some reports of it. Times Union reported on it. New York Post reported on it. Here's the New York Post. And this is their story. They said that the FBI raided the home of ex-UN inspector Scott Ritter. And it was really confusing as to what was going on and why. We do know, however, that about a month or so ago, Scott Ritter was trying to fly to Russia for a convention, and he was stopped at the airport, and his passport was seized. So he was unable to get on the plane to Russia. We talked to him about that. That happened maybe a month or 2 months ago. So that is what we know. We know that his passport was taken. He, at that point, when he came on the show to talk about it, said he didn't know anything. They just took it, and they didn't really say anything to him about why. They didn't give him any information. They just basically said, you're not allowed to leave the country by seizing his passport, which seemed quite unconstitutional. If you're not going to charge somebody, if a judge is not going to say, look, you cannot leave the country, so we're taking your passport, it seems really unconstitutional that that authorities at the airport could just suddenly seize your passport without giving you any reason, without charging you with a crime. So they then, but we don't know. We don't know everything. Scott could be remaining quite mum on things, and maybe the attorney is telling him to stay mum, or maybe he just wants to stay mum, but there could have been more to that story. That is just what we knew. Then we see that his house is being raided today. Well, then Scott did come out and he actually made a statement about it. This is what he had to say.
Search warrant at my residence. The search warrant is related to concerns apparently the U.S. government has about violations of the Foreign Agent Registration Act. I will tell you right now, I am not in violation of the Foreign Agent Registration Act. I have not done anything that will do it, and hopefully by executing the search warrant and taking the materials that they did, they will rapidly reach that conclusion. I will say that things like this have a chilling effect on free speech. There's no doubt that I'm being targeted because of statements I've made about U.S. policy in Ukraine. I'm being targeted because I have made an effort to try and improve relations between the United States and Russia, to try to bring about control, to bring about peace. Apparently somebody in the U.S. government takes umbrage at this, so they executed a search warrant. The FBI was extraordinarily professional. I have no complaints against the personnel that did this. I do have complaints against the personnel that caused this to happen. This has a chilling impact on free speech. The idea that you have a free speech right in America, when you execute it in a manner that the U.S. government takes exception to, and they launch a search warrant, that is an intimidation factor. I can say that I am not intimidated, and I will continue to speak out, and I will continue to do what I do, because that's my responsibility as an American citizen, and I will continue to operate in that manner. So I think I gave you all the answers you need at this point in time. I would request that you respect that and let me and my wife get on with our business.
What time did they show up today?
I don't know. They were here a long time. So,
Can you say generally what type of stuff was in the boxes they took?
The search warrant allowed them to look for electronic equipment. They were clearly interested in communications that I'd had with people related to the work I do. That's all I can say about it. It's up to them to review it. I have nothing to hide. I was cooperative with them, and it is what it is, and we'll get on with it. But as I said, I respect their right to do what they did. I'm not in violation of the law, and I will not be intimidated. So anybody upstairs who thought that this will intimidate me and cause me to stop speaking out, they guessed wrong. Have a great day.
Passport from you a couple weeks ago?
They took that. That's an old story. My passport was seized when I returned from Russia back in June, when I was getting ready to leave for Russia back in June.
You say they took stuff that was related to your work. What work exactly?
I'm a writer. You figure it out. You're a journalist. Imagine if they did a search warrant in your workplace. What would they take? 2 plus 2 equals 4.
So he's a journalist. He's doing writing. He's also speaking out. He has a podcast. He's also a regular contributor onto Sputnik, which is a radio station. And they've now gone after him for under the FARA Act, which is the Foreign Agents Registration Act. That act says that if you are in a position, you're working on behalf of a foreign country, being paid by a foreign country, and you are looking to influence public opinion, public policy, government policy, any of those types of things, then you need to register with the government as a foreign agent. the people who work for Sputnik and for RT have to register under this because the government says that, well, Russia funds these media outlets, and so they're giving them their marching orders on what to say, and it's influencing public opinion, and so therefore they have to register under the FAR Act. What's interesting, though, about the FAR Act is that it's not consistent. It's used as a tool to go after anybody they want to just silence. It doesn't really matter if the country, when you look at the history of the FAR Act and who they've gone after, it doesn't really matter if the country they're working for is a friendly country, an allied country, or an adversary. That doesn't really have an effect on whether or not you're going to be charged under the FAR Act. Now, when it comes to journalism, as it stands right now, those who work for RT, those who work for Sputnik, those who work for Chinese media, they have to register under the FAR Act, even if they're given total freedom, journalistic freedom, which many of them at RT and Sputnik are. But it doesn't matter if they are, they're still paid. Essentially, the money comes from the government. Some part of it comes from the Russian or Chinese government, so they have to register. But then you ask, okay, well, if you have to register if you're working for Russia or China, what if you work for the BBC? What if you work for a British or Australian news or German news? And the answer to that is no. If you're working as a journalist for those outlets, you don't have to register under the FAR Act because they're not adversarial countries, is what they'll say. They say, well, what about Al Jazeera? Because that's funded by the Qatar government. By the Qatari government. So and are they an ally? Are they a foreign adversary? And that ends up being one that gets debated a lot, is whether or not people who work for Al Jazeera would have to register. Now, remember, all countries are foreign countries, and we really shouldn't kind of look at any other country as an ally specifically, because that could change at any minute. A country could one minute be our ally and the next minute be our adversary. Look at Germany for an example. You can work for the German media and it's okay in the United States today. You do not have to register under the FAR Act.
And another thing regarding what you just said about any country can be an ally or an adversary at a drop of a hat. And everybody talking about Russian influence in the U.S. elections, which I mean, if there's Russian influence in the elections, it's no more or no less happening than it would be with British influence or French influence of a U.S. election. Or for that matter, it'd be no different, And in fact, I would argue that there's less Russian influence in the U.S. election than, let's say, with the Israeli government, who's really, they kind of call a lot of shots of what goes on inside the United States, and I don't mean it in any sort of like a trope, bigoted sort of way, But I do believe that. I do believe the Israeli government, they do meddle in a lot of ways. I mean, during the Obama years, not that I want to defend Obama, but during the Obama years, that the right wing in this country loved it when Netanyahu was the prime minister. And then they loved the way that he was undermining the Obama presidency, and they were beating up on Obama because Obama didn't go out of his way to go and greet Netanyahu. And my question is, why? When other prime ministers and presidents and chancellors and other heads of state may or may not get a greeting from the president. But for some reason, when it comes to Netanyahu, you got to go and treat him like you had to treat him better than the Pope. Just about when he gets here, you have to go and lick his asshole when he gets here to the United States. And, it's just like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is this? And I wish that I didn't have to work that night on July 25th, where I could have gone to DC and protested. But suffice to say, I had to work that night and I couldn't get out of it. But I was there in spirit, protesting against Netanyahu, speaking in the U.S. joint session of Congress. And I mentioned this story before. About how 10 years ago when he was speaking at the U.S. Congress, some Republicans were giving even Senator Rand Paul a hard time because Rand Paul did a polite applaud instead of an emotional applaud. I was like, come on now, really? You're going to go there with that? So anyway, we'll let Kim Iverson finish.
The last big war we were in, World War II, was against Germany. So of course things can change. And allies can become adversaries, and adversaries can become allies. And that is why this act is particularly nefarious. It's nefarious because it's just up to whoever is sitting in the Justice Department, whether or not they want to go after somebody and for why. Now, I just gave you examples of what you would say, well, those are adversaries. Russia and China are adversaries. Now, we're not at war with either of them. We're not supposed to be at war with either of them. There's been no declared war, not that they've declared war since World War II, but there's been no declared war against either of these countries. And I don't know if it would be exactly fair to say China is an adversary. They're not funding, they're not at war with anybody. They're not funding an adversary in a war that we're engaged in. They're friendly with everybody, and that's a problem for the U.S. government. They don't like that China goes around and says, we're going to stay out of it, and we're going to try to have diplomatic relations with all of you. And they've maintained their diplomatic relationship with Russia, of course, with the United States, with Israel, with the Palestinians, with the Arabs. They kind of have that relationship with everybody because they're just in it for business. So the question then is, and what we've also seen recently, just the most recent person who's been charged under the FARA Act was a woman who was charged for potentially spying on behalf of South Korea, which is an ally. We have American bases in South Korea. You've got Paul Manafort, for example, who went to jail for failing to register the FARA Act for working on behalf of Ukraine, also another ally. So you've got all these allies and people are being charged under that, but then you have these but again, it's kind of it's up to the people sitting in the Justice Department who they want to go after, why they want to go after those people, what it is their motivation, and really because it's so flimsy and they could kind of charge anybody for any reason, it could be weaponized. It could be easily weaponized, and that's what Scott Ritter is alleging. He's alleging that his speaking up on behalf of Russia, trying to help Americans see the Russian perspective so that we can make a decision for ourselves whether or not the government is doing the right thing, rather than just blindly trusting our government and just saying, well, the government said, and so that's what I got to think. It's good for us to hear the other side. It's good for us to hear, especially if we're going to be sending men and women off to war, if we're going to be funding wars, if we're going to be piling up dead bodies. It's good for us to at least hear what the other side is thinking and why they feel need to go to war, what their side of the story is, because maybe we could diplomatically work it out. That's exactly what diplomacy is. So Scott is alleging that because as a journalist who's been making the rounds on various different outlets, having his own show, writing, being a regular contributor for Sputnik, he's alleging that as a journalist, they're coming after him for speaking a narrative that they do not like. However, it could be that because he is a regular contributor to Sputnik, maybe that is, they're saying you have to register under the FARA Act. Maybe there's something else there. He has taken trips to Russia recently that, one could question, well, who funded those trips? Who coordinated the trips? I mean, there's a lot of questions there, but I think whether or not he actually, one could say, okay, well, maybe he did. Maybe the Russian government, let's just say the Russian government did plan his trips. Maybe they did pay for his trips. Maybe they are funding Sputnik and journalists are operating on Sputnik and on RT and they have journalistic freedom. Maybe all of that is happening. The question is then, what does that matter? Should they have to register under the FARA Act as journalists, even if a foreign government is paying it? And that's a question that I think could be debated, whether or not, and if they are going to be needing to register, then why not everybody? Why not people who are also working for the BBC, people working?
That's right. Consistency is what matters. But when was the last time the U.S. was consistent? And here's another thing when it comes to foreign policy and the U.S. rattle sabling, and we seem to not be able to learn our lessons when it comes to these foreign wars, which is why what Scott Ritter's doing, what he needs to do and supposed to do, because our U.S. government will lie to us. And we all realize, many of us did in my audience here, including myself, that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We knew that. A lot of people, a lot of mainstream Democrats and majority of the Republican Party, virtually the entire GOP, said, oh, we're a bunch of conspiracy theorists, or we're siding with Saddam Hussein because we said there were no weapons of mass destruction. As it turned out that what the left said was correct. And even a lot of conservatives were like, it was kind of sucked that we went into Iraq. And so now the liberals are like, we need to back the Ukraine government. They're doing the same thing a lot of conservatives did with Iraq in 2002. And I think in about 2 or 3 years, if the world doesn't roast up in a nuclear war, that they're going to be like, well, gee, should have listened to some of these folks that were warning us about this situation between Russia and the Ukraine. So, there is that. And then, you got people, you got people on both sides from both parties that always thought going into Iraq was the right thing to do to this day, and people who, from both parties who are okay with giving Zelensky all that cash and keeping that proxy war going on with NATO backing the Ukraine against Russia.
Working for German media, people working for Israeli media. Why not everybody? It should be an easy standard and consistent standard to make and maintain, but they don't want to do it that way because they want to be able to weaponize it. So they keep it vague, and you just don't know who they're going to go after. One thing to note, the FAR Act resulted in, when it was implemented, I believe in the 60s is when they started it. Since the 60s up until about 2016, there were only 6 people charged or at least convicted under the FAR Act. They rarely actually went after anybody under the FAR Act. Since especially 2016, since Donald Trump became president of the United States, they started weaponizing it quite a bit. And there have been now a number of people who've been charged under the FAR Act. And that is not just those who are working. And you'll notice that the people that were charged under the FAR Act for activities regarding Ukraine, it was when Donald Trump was president. It's when they were going after those people, when he was being impeached for calling up Zelensky and asking him to, look into certain things or whatever. That is when they ramped up the FAR Act for those who were working on behalf of Ukraine. Now, if you're working on behalf of Ukraine today, do you think that they would actually use the FAR Act? Do you think they would utilize it and go after people? So this is just a tool to weaponize. This is not an actual law. They're being consistent. You break the law, you pay the price. This is a weapon that the government is using, and they're just picking and choosing when they want to utilize that weapon and against who. And that is something that we should be vocally against. We should say, look, we need to have a consistent standard for the FAR Act. I do think that the FAR Act is needed. I don't think it's needed for journalists at all. I think it should be eliminated for any and all journalists. I don't care who they're paid for. Who they're paid by. I don't care if they're paid by China, Russia, Israel, Ukraine, the BBC, the British, the Australians. I don't care who they're paid by. Journalists should be left alone from the FAR Act. It's when you get into influencing policy. So when you are lobbying the government, you are lobbying government officials, then I think we could say, all right, look, if you're going to lobby the government, if you're going to pressure for certain policies, if you're going to be a super PAC in this country, and you're engaging in political activities, direct political activities, and you are being paid by a foreign government, you need to register under the FAR Act. That's my viewpoint on this. Love to hear from you. Kim at KimIverson.com. Tell me, who do you think should register under the FAR Act? Should it be used at all against journalism? When you look at Scott Ritter, you're thinking, okay, well then who did he lobby? I mean, here he is sitting with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Scott lives just outside of Albany. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been in Albany. Here's the picture. He's been in Albany in court. We've been covering his court case where the Democrats are trying to rip him off the New York ballot. The two of them met up. My hope after seeing this image last night was thinking, I hope Scott Ritter is talking some sense into Bobby about Palestine and Israel and what is going on over there. Maybe he was able to. Maybe he wasn't. There's a lot of policies that RFK Jr. has that I absolutely agree with. I just really differ with him on this one big policy that I feel like he's way too early influenced on. Many people feel that way. But seeing this image, this is not lobbying a politician. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has not been elected to office. And so this could not be considered Scott Ritter lobbying a politician on behalf of a foreign government. Scott Ritter is a journalist. That is who he is. That is what he's been doing. And he's now being persecuted by the government for being a prominent voice who's been speaking out on behalf of Russia, trying to help. And look, like I said, even if he is being paid, if you're a journalist, if you're just a speaker, I don't think there's anything that needs to be registered there. It's really when you're really trying to influence policy, you're paying, you're lobbying politicians, you're funding their campaigns, you're meeting with politicians in order to influence policy. That is when that act should be implemented. And I think we should all be speaking out against it and protecting journalists from things like the FAR Act, from things like the Espionage Act. Hey guys, this was just a clip of a longer show. Catch the full show by going to KimIversonShow.com. It is.
Okay, I'm back. Well, here's the thing. When it comes to I like listening to Kim Iverson's take on these matters because she's always got a level head. I don't always agree with her on every single issue, but when I do agree with her, I profoundly do agree with her. And on this one, I would say I do agree with her. And as I said, what's going on with against Scott Ritter should concern us all. If you care about civil liberties, you care about free speech and free press, you care about my rights, your rights, and everybody else's rights, and being consistent about it. Do it for selfish reasons because you care about your rights and you realize that same government can be weaponized against. If it's being weaponized against somebody you may not particularly care for, it could be weaponized against somebody it could be weaponized against you or somebody you do care for. I do respect Scott Ritter, and I like the work he does, and he's been doing, and I am deeply bothered by by what they have done to him. And here's the thing. I may not like the political direction Tulsi Gabbard has tiptoed herself into, but the fact that she's being targeted, I don't like I don't like seeing people being targeted when there's no need to target an individual, and that's what it comes down to. I consider myself to be. I like to be consistent on these matters, and that's what it comes down to. So anyway, I got to go in a minute here, but I'll go and talk real quick, and I'll get the hell out of here. So let's see. Desert Master said, I vote Willie for the next Julian Assange. Well, I don't know, but thank you for that. I don't think I'm quite Julian Assange, but I supported him from day one when it all started out. So let's see here. All right, let's see. We're going to go and scroll down. Ed Heller said that we live in 1984. I agree that that's the situation, and we must make 1984 fiction again. And we are the fascist surveillance state of America these days. So there is that. All right. And Warren, how are you doing today? Hola, peeps. So anyway, yeah. So I don't care who you are. It stinks that the U.S. government's signaling out Tulsi Gabbard. It stinks that the U.S. government signaling out, signaling out Scott Ritter, or whether in its own way, forcing, even people like Caleb Maupin or people like Chris Hedges or Nico House or some of these other folks who have worked with RT, having on their Twitter page at one time that they are, working for a foreign media company, have kind of, putting a stamp of shame on their Twitter profile. I mean, not that that's anything to be ashamed of, but that's what it is. It's a form of McCarthyism, and we must not allow this neo McCarthyism to take place. We eventually got over McCarthyism. We must put that genie back in the bottle and never make sure that's not to be repeated again. Sorry, out. We need to go and as principal civil libertarians, we need to go and put that genie back in the bottle. So anyway, I am going to say, I'm going to make my announcements tomorrow that at 5 o'clock p.m. we're going to have, at 5 p.m. tomorrow, we're going to have Braglands. Braglands will be on. We're back again on the air. And Willie Bragg Show will be on 8 p.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays at 8 p.m. That's the new thing right now. Regarding everything else, I'm going to go right now. So if you like what you heard, please press like and comment. Comment anyway if you disagree with what I have to say. Feel free to share the content on this channel. As the First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it because we are, in fact, the muckrakers of our time. Reject corporate media. And until next time, free and pardon Ed Snowden, pardon Julian Assange, and free Palestine, free healthcare for all. And of course, remember, also, free speech absolutism, let it rain. Take care. Bye-bye.